Hello, 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 book family, and welcome back to Through the Pages with Dee. So, got another review for you here, guys. I have recently been kindly sent, surprisingly, overwhelmingly sent, a couple of books by the author Steve Stark. He is an independent author, and I recently read A Hot Dose of Hell. So, being a horror fan, I'm reading all these books and they turn out to me to be more like psychological thrillers. There isn't the gore in them that I believe is horror. When you're talking horror, I want to be horrified. Now, I am a little bit sort of desensitized to horror. I was raised on horror. I've watched everything that you can possibly think of. There are some I've recently found that I haven't watched. One I won't watch, which I find is too ridiculous. If it's ridiculous, I won't watch it, which is like the Human Centipede and things like that. I won't watch it. So I have admittedly watched more horror than I've read. However, the horror that I've read has, in certain circumstances, been what I've been looking for, or it's been kind of a turn where I would call it more supernatural, more kind of thriller-esque. There have been horror elements, but it wouldn't be what I necessarily call horror for me. What I want from horror is more like Saw, more blood, guts, gore, that kind of thing. Or if we're going to go down the supernatural route, I want to read something that makes me physically go, oh, I'm not sure I like that. Generally that plays, and if anybody out there has got any suggestions for me, there's a lovely lady who I speak to via email called Amber Lee. She is a reviewer herself, and she has suggested a lot of horror authors to me, who I am in time going to pick up, especially for Halloween. I'm definitely going to be doing my entire month dedicated to horror for Halloween, because let's face it, I want to find some decent horror. So, how this played out, I was on Twitter, I saw the author for Sledge, we all know what Sledge is, and I was just, saying I can't wait to get to that book and read it, because I know it's had some really good reviews. And then Steve popped up, who is the author of this book, and we was all just chatting and whatnot, and posting these gifs, and I thought, I've found my people. As far as horror goes, I've found my people. They get it. They use the blue language. They talk on my level. And Steve is actually from the UK. He is a UK lad. So that too added to me now wanting to read A Hot Dose of Hell. So I've read it. It didn't take me long because I got into it. It's not a very long book. How many pages is it? Let's have a look. It is 260 pages of horror. This is horror. So let's start with the characters. Okay, let's start there. So it's based in Skarmouth, and it's very based in the UK. It's very UK based. So that felt very much at home for me. I think that's maybe what made a little bit of a difference, is I could relate to what Steve was writing about. He's writing about like Superdrug and, like Tesco and, things like that, where it's UK based shops. So I could see where he was talking about. I could visualize it. It's a little more difficult when the basis of the story is like America based, because I've never been outside of the UK, so it's hard for me, other than what you see on television, for me to sort of place myself there. When it's UK based, I can do that quite easily. I can walk in my high street and I can see a Superdrug. So that made this, sorry about the noise, my window's open, although I do like that noise. That's a motorbike. Sounds beautiful. So it made this quite a bit more difficult. It makes it quite more difficult when it's American based to this, which is UK based. So this was a lot easier to get into. So as you can see from the cover, we've got syringes. So therefore then, yes, it is drug related. It's related to this drug that has now been released on the streets. It's quite deadly, but it's having these very adverse effects on the people taking it. So some of our characters are called Roxy and Kenny. Roxy and Kenny are junkies, and they do use drugs. They are addicts, and they come across this particular night this guy who he's talking to Roxy like he's going to take her for the night because she's, she's kind of selling herself on the street to make money to be able to get the drugs, which is kind of, a normal occurrence. But she then finds that he's got this amount of drugs in the back of his car that is ridiculous. It can make her and Kenny so much money. There's kilos and kilos of this stuff. So her and Kenny take advantage of this guy, take the drugs. Their intention is not only to use but to sell. We then meet Roxy's sister called Rhonda. Rhonda very much gives impressions of, if you are familiar, and you should be by now, with the game The Last of Us, and the girl that's in that called Amy, she's in the second Last of Us, she's kind of the antagonist to the protagonist, which is Ellie. So Rhonda gives me Amy vibes, that kind of buff hench girl. When you first meet her, she's at work and she's working out. She's lifting herself up on pipes, and she does this on a daily. And one of her colleagues she's having a conversation with, and they're talking about how she's not heard from her sister Roxy in quite a while. Granted, the last time she heard from her was like borrow money for obviously her addiction, but she wants to find her sister, sort of get her treatment, help her out, etc. So we meet Rhonda as well. So Rhonda is about to go and try and save Roxy, but Rhonda is about to go and do this with these guys who are seemingly to be kind of well-off kids. That's kind of, or well-off 20-year-olds. That's kind of the impression I got, who are from probably privileged backgrounds and have got it in their heads that they want to go and help the homeless. So she's going to go with them to Skarmouth to find Roxy and hopefully bring her home. But she's also prepared for, the dangers she might face within that. When you're talking about potential homeless and junkies, some, obviously through what they go through, may want to protect themselves. So she takes a weapon to protect herself, which is the kosh, the telescopic kosh. She takes that. So that's where the story starts off, is we're introduced to Roxy and Kenny, we're introduced to Rhonda, then we're also introduced to what are sort of the hired henchmen, which is Fred and Pinky. Pinky is Polish, I believe, if memory serves me correct, and Fred is just from the UK. And these two are like the guys who are part of the drug world, but they keep it in order. They're the heavies that are sent out, basically. If something goes wrong and, maybe somebody needs getting rid of or money needs to be collected, you'd send Fred and Pinky. So it's this whole story that's wrapped around these characters. And this drug has other connotations to it. It's not just your typical heroin that you can shoot up and you'll be fine. It's kind of a test drug. So I won't go much further than that into the drug itself. But what Steve manages to do here in this book is kind of envelop you in this world of what ifs. What if the government decided to start playing a part in the drugs on the street and wanted to have kind of an experiment? And this experiment could be taken two ways. It's either, in the eyes of the general population, gone terribly wrong, or in the eyes of the people performing this experiment, has gone extremely well. There's lots of gore. There's lots of sort of detail in this gore as to bloodshed and attack and the methodology of attack and what it actually does to people. Very, very bloody, very gory, and I have absolutely loved it. I think this is a great start. I think it's awesome. It deserves an awful lot of credit. It is very well written. It's a brilliant story to follow. The characters are brilliant. The characters do arc, so you meet them and then sort of Rhonda definitely takes an arc. She takes one hell of an arc, put it that way. It's kick-ass. It's, like I said, full of blood, full of guts. The environments he describes so well. You can feel yourself there. You can feel the grit and the grime of the Victoria Hotel where the squatters are basically staying, which is where ultimately everybody ends up, they're all sort of in different places, but they all culminate to the Victoria Hotel, because that's where Roxy was last seen. And the homeless guy that Rhonda gets to help her find Roxy, that's where he takes them to, is the Victoria Hotel, because everybody knows that's where these particular squatters live. And it's there that more of the violence occurs. It starts off with Fred and Pinky in kind of a brothel, and things have gone a bit tits up there. And then we go from there to Fred and Pinky following the trail of the drugs, because their boss, who is Glaswegian. And can I just say as well, on a side note, accents in this book, especially the Glaswegian accent, Steve writes it as you speak it. And I don't think I've found an author yet who has done accent work quite as well. Steve writes the Glaswegian accent so well in this. I had to tell him, I had to let him know that I thought that was brilliant. The way he wrote the Glaswegian accent, it's not easy to do. It's not easy to actually write an accent so that as you, as a reader, read it, you're actually understanding. But the way Steve wrote it, before he even mentioned and said that this particular character was Glaswegian, I knew they were. I knew they were Scottish, because the way he wrote it just read like the way that they would speak. So I knew that already. I didn't need that to be said to me. But when it was, I was like, knew it. I knew that was Glaswegian. So I just want to give Steve huge amounts of credit there, because I don't think that's an easy thing to do. Is actually write something that is a verbal thing, something that is a spoken thing. To actually write it is quite a hard thing. I do it sometimes, messing about in texts, having a bit of banter with my fella back and forth. And I'm going to sound really big-headed now, but I think I sometimes am quite good at being able to write out the way a different accent would sound. Because in the UK, it's very regional. We have very different regional accents. So you can go sort of maybe 10, 15 miles and you'll find a different accent. So there's lots of different accents in the UK. But for Steve to actually be able to nail that Glaswegian accent, I thought was superb. He did then go on to say that his dad was from Glasgow, so that was kind of the way around it. But even so, you can mimic an accent, you can learn it. You're right. How's it going? You can mimic it, but to write it so it sounds like that is another skill entirely. So I want to credit Steve with that massively. That was superb. But I also want to credit Steve with the way that he writes the effects of this drug, and the attacking and the violence. It's so intense that you can't not sort of squirm reading it. I'm not a squirmy person. It takes a lot for me to squirm, but I imagine that this will make some people squirm in the detail that Steve puts into just how this drug is affecting people. It's so good. It's kick-ass, it's violent, it's gore, and I love that. I love a good amount of gore, and just, maybe some people might consider it shock tactics. I actually quite like that. I want to be shocked. If you can shock me, then shock me. Can't say that I was shocked, but I did really, really enjoy it. And the characters, like I say, are great. They have great arcs. They're really interesting. The relationship between Fred and Pinky is superb. Rhonda and how she's described, and her little journey, and these people who are not anywhere like her. They're so far from who she is. They're all very sort of, hippie and Greenpeace and Save the Planet and that kind of people. And Rhonda's just not that. Rhonda's just very sort of simplistic, and she works out, and, she goes to work and she does her job, and she kind of keeps to herself. She doesn't come across as kind of a social butterfly. She just comes across as kind of this woman who's just getting up and doing her daily life, but has very much got concentrated aspects of her life on fitness. And she does come across as being quite buff and hench, but she's determined to kind of help her sister. So there is that tie between her and her sister. So it's just, his character writing, superb. His environment structure, superb. When he's talking about the descriptiveness of the Victoria and the different floors to the building and what they look like, and the fact that it's not lit, so they're having to use the phones, or Fred and Pinky being hitmen, I should say, go in quite well equipped, and Fred goes in with, like, I think it's Fred who wears it. Yeah, Fred goes in with like a miner's helmet on. It's just those little touches that make the difference to environmentally taking you into the story. I think it's brilliant. I really, really enjoyed it. I think it's superb. It's a superb horror. And if you are into horror and you haven't heard of A Hot Dose of Hell, I would definitely say pick it up, give it a go. You can see there, it's a superb cover. I love that cover. This is a mask with the syringes in a skull. So yeah, it's basically all about this new drug that is on the streets, and it's kind of deadly, but it does do something to its victims and sends them into kind of a frenzy. And people are dying because of this frenzy that this drug is sending them into. So yeah, and then we've got the story, like I say, of Rhonda looking for her sister Roxy. She gets in touch with these people who are kind of a charity-based thing, who help the homeless. They're more kind of, your social media type people. The girl, she's just doing it. If memory serves me right, her name is Penny, I think. Let me just have a quick look. Poppy, sorry. Not Penny, Poppy. She's more about, taking the pictures, taking the video, getting the likes. She's trying to make it out as if they're being quite helpful towards the homeless. But I'm not entirely sure that that's the whole principle of why she's doing this. I think it's more for her own kind of benefit than it is for the homeless. And when she does actually go to the Victoria with Rhonda, all she's brought them is kind of toiletries when they want, food and, that kind of thing. And literally all she's brought is non-perishables like toiletries, which, ultimately is helpful, but, these people want to eat. So yeah, I think the Poppy is kind of in this for the wrong reasons. And then she's got these clan of people, these boys with her, who are kind of doting on her because she is a good-looking girl, and they're kind of seemingly there for the wrong reasons. And then you've got the guy who's driving the van that they're all in. Yeah, and it's just how the story plays out and how it affects all these characters in their own way, and how eventually Rhonda, Fred and Pinky all have to team up to be able to actually get out of the Victoria Hotel, because there's just this drug and its effects and what it's done. So yeah, if you're into that gore, if you're into the dark, seedy kind of, but with a fun element, with humour to it, because there is humour in this book, and it did make me laugh quite a few times actually. But if that's what you're looking for in a horror, then I would absolutely advise A Hot Dose of Hell by Steve Stark. I think it's superb. I really, really enjoyed it. He does have another one, which is what he said is a trilogy. I have shared that picture. I did share that picture on Twitter. So if you want to go to my Twitter, you can see it there. He has two out now. So he's got A Hot Dose of Hell. So Steve's other book, which is the trilogy called Violent Ends, I also have been sent that. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. I'm not sure if maybe I'm going to take that on holiday with me. It might sound a bit weird, but, I don't actually know if I'm going to read while I'm away, but I may take that with me to read that. But yeah, he's really good. I love the setting. It's set in the UK. There's accents put in there for Kenny and for Pinky, because Pinky's Polish, and then obviously Pinky and Fred's boss, who's Glaswegian. But it's the environments that Steve creates, the kind of grammar that he's using to create these accents, the gore, the way he describes the attacks and the violence, the whole thing really is immersive. It's brilliant, and it's great horror. So if you like your horror, there's a suggestion for you. For an indie author, I would suggest A Hot Dose of Hell by Steve Stark. And yeah, I can't say any more than that. It's a great book. Give it a read. I loved it. You can tell Steve has put a lot of heart and soul into this, and a lot of, himself with regards to like the Glaswegian accent with his dad. But it's just brilliant. It's a really, really good horror, and I definitely suggest if you're into horror and you want something that's a little different, a little bit more gory, but good gore, with great character interactions, great character arcs. And then at the end, something a little bit different, a kind of a revelation, and a little bit of a twist. I would definitely say give Stark a hot dose of hell and Violent Ends a go. Okay, so that's it for me. It is Friday. I do suggest you have yourselves a fantastic weekend. Hopefully the weather here in the UK is going to pick up a little bit. It has been nice last couple of days, but it's kind of on and off. So it's not really kind of sit out weather, because it's sunny then cloudy, sunny then cloudy. But yes, that's me for today. Enjoy yourselves. Have a great weekend. Do something kind for someone. And whatever you do, make sure that it makes you smile. I will see you guys next week on Monday for a week in view. Other than that, take care of yourselves. Love you all. Bye bye. Hey everyone. Thanks as usual for watching this video, and if you want more content, you can click on one of the following links. Thanks so much for your support. See you again next time.